is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. And my guest is Jon Fingas of Engadget. Hi, Jon. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thanks.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to have you on. You know, we tried to do it just before the holidays and it just didn't work out, but I've been meaning to have you on because you've been with Engadget for a really long time. You were there when I worked there, and you pick up all these random news stories. And you write about phones quite a bit in the end. So, you know, and I just heard you got an essential phone recently to play with. So I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I did actually. It was kind of happy because I mean, actually, I really like those phones that are like slightly oddball phones, like not necessarily the mainstream ones, the ones that everybody's going to be picking up, like not like a Galaxy S8 or something like that, but the slightly quirky phones, and it's like. And actually, in many ways, I actually quite like it. Although I'm kind of cheating with it because I mean, you know how the default essential camera app is kind of trash, basically.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's that well, not a hack, but like this trick where basically you install this modified version of the Google Camera app on your phone.
That's great. Yeah.
And so mysteriously, the camera app on your essential phone goes from being garbage to something that you would actually want to use. So,
indeed. Yeah, are you using the Pixel camera? Because that's the one I'm using on my essential.
Yeah, actually, I'm trying to remember. I think it's at least, well, actually, this shows how little I actually tinker with camera apps and things like that. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be the actual Pixel app, but
that's the one I'm thinking about. Yeah, you got it on XDA forums, right?
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah,
so
that's the one I'm using too. Yeah, so that one gives you all the awesome. It's not the Pixel 2 app. I believe they haven't created an APK for that yet, but it's last year's Pixel app, and it's a really good camera app. It does a lot of the some of the basic AI stuff like the HDR stuff really well, and on the Essential it does make quite a bit of a difference.
Oh yeah, so it's the difference from like basically having to like sit there and twiddle your thumbs while you're taking a photo, waiting for it to process or what have you, and just being able to use it like a good camera phone. So it's obvious that like the problem with the Essentials, like photography, isn't the hardware. The hardware is fine. It's the software that just isn't up to the job.
Indeed, yeah. I think I think this is a mod that everybody should do. Download that from the XDA forums. If you have a phone that supports it, meaning I think Snapdragon 835 and 820 phones. Not all of them will work, but most of them will. And if you have a phone that does it, go and download that app. It makes a huge difference. It also makes a difference on the OnePlus 5 and the OnePlus 5T, but less so because the camera app especially on the 5T now, has been pretty nicely improved. My big thing about the Pixel camera on the Essential is that it gives you something that the default camera just doesn't have, which is, other than fixing a bunch of issues, it gives you grid lines, which for some reason is not even an option on the default camera.
Yeah, that just shows shows how little, well, not how little effort they put into it, but like how this is very clearly their version 1.0 product, and they still have a lot to learn about how to make a great smartphone. So, I wish they'd. Actually, I honestly wish they would have spent just maybe 3 months, 6 months or something like that, just working on the software, mastering it, and getting to the point, because you only have one chance at a debut, and they kind of fluffed it, even if they have made some improvements over time.
I agree. And but in other ways, I love the phone. I think it's really feels great in hand. It's kind of like the perfect size, the perfect screen to body aspect ratio. It kind of, in a way, reminds me of the iPhone 10 in terms of being almost, and the Galaxy S8, not S8 Plus, in terms of being kind of like the perfect size phone.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's actually in some ways it feels a bit wide, although that's maybe partly because it's got those flat edges to it. But yeah, it's like it doesn't feel like a big phone, even though you've got this 5.7-inch screen, if I remember correctly. That's like basically dominating almost the entire face of it. So I really like that.
Yeah, me too. Another thing that I like is, how it's built, like the materials. I do feel that, it's nice. The pure Android is really nice on it. It is a bit crashy. I don't know if you saw Android Central wrote about that. I think it was Andrew Martonic. And I've had some crashes, more crashes than most of my other phones. I don't know if you've experienced that at all, but...
I've experienced a little bit of it, but it hasn't exactly been a chronic problem where it's like, oh gosh, like Instagram crashed again or Twitter crashed again. It's like, no, it's like, maybe once in a blue moon, like some app just decides it's not going to be working properly today, so it crashes, and then you restart it, and hopefully you haven't lost anything. So
right, yeah. What color did you get?
I ended up getting the black one. I forget what they exactly call it, but. White would have been actually pretty sweet, but at the same time, I really can't complain because the black one, in a sense, kind of fits the whole aesthetic of basically nothing but screen. Like this thing kind of like the actual phone fades into the background, and you're just looking at the display.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from the front, it makes no difference. I like the white one, and that's what they sent me as a review in it. I didn't have a choice. It just came. I was just pleasantly surprised to get the white one because, I love white phones. Is yours a review in it? Did you spend money on it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So yeah, I dropped money on it. So it was like, I got it for a good deal, but it was like, yeah, it's, it was one of those things where like, okay, I actually really kind of needed an Android reference phone because the other phone I had been using for a reference point was like the Nexus 5, like not the 5X, the original 5. And it's like that thing hasn't gone past Marshmallow. So it was kind of like, okay, I kind of need to catch up in a big way. So this thing's, I haven't done anything silly, not silly, but like risky, like installing Oreo on it. But just having a phone with Nougat on it as like, oh, hey, this is, welcome to, I guess now 2018. Like this is what, this is what Android phones are like right now, as opposed to like, say, 2 or 3 years ago. So.
No, I hear you. So are you still primarily an iPhone user then?
Yeah, I'm still primarily an iPhone user. I mean, I actually have an Apple Watch Series 3, so I'm somewhat tethered to the iPhone for that reason.
Right. You like it. What iPhone is your current iPhone?
I actually still have an iPhone 7. I actually was seriously tempted to get an iPhone 10, but I thought, first, it's like a lot of money to spend after just a year of having the iPhone 7. And also, I mean, quite frankly, the iPhone 7's like still good enough for like 95% of the things I would want to do with it. So. Oh yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. The only thing I really miss is because it's just a regular 7 and not a 7 Plus is like I don't have a dual camera, so I can't zoom into things or do portrait shots or things like that. But I'm content to wait, I guess, probably until whatever shows up in September for the iPhone 10's follow up. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. I want to actually touch on this. This is another little bit of news that came about, and I don't want to dwell too much on it, but there was all these rumors, and it's really misleading headlines. I really hate the reporting that's been done on this. And if you want to get some sensible news about it, please read Daring Fireball, John Gruber. But there's that rumor that came out that Apple is going to discontinue the iPhone 10 this summer or soon or whatever. And of course, that's quite possible. They did that with the iPhone 5 when they switched over to the 5S and the 5C. And they did that with the original iPhone after a year. But it doesn't mean they're not going to replace it with something equivalent or better. And so, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go out and buy an iPhone 10. I just got my own. I finally spent my own money because I couldn't get a review in it a couple of weeks before Christmas. And I really love my iPhone 10. Again, iOS is not really my bag. But I have to say, in terms of hardware, it's the most Android-like iPhone I have ever used. And I really, really like it for that.
Yeah, it's like actually, I mean, I suppose for me, it's like, I suppose I would need it to be Android, but I think it's like, it's in a sense, it feels like Apple just kind of went from hovering somewhere around 2014 in terms of hardware design to, I guess, like 2017, 2018. Like it feels like a modern phone in every sense of the word. So,
yeah, I mean, and to me, that's always been a bit of an issue with Apple in the last few years. You know, it's like they just didn't seem to be making an effort. I know that they did because their phones are good. And in terms of processor, they've always beat everybody else's pants off. But, you know, like you looked at an iPhone 7 or 7 Plus and even an 8 and you're like, what is this? Is this a phone from 2010? Like, it just does not look modern. It just doesn't look advanced. You know, to me, even the Galaxy S7, which doesn't have, you know, an edge-to-edge display in the sense of the top and the bottom bezels, still looks like a much more futuristic design, you know? And or even the Galaxy S6 before it. So I was kind of really hoping the iPhone 10 would like kind of bring Apple's design language and technology to, you know, and I've gotten a lot of trouble. I've gotten in trouble big time for saying this on Twitter, but to kind of catch up in terms of hardware. Other than processing power, I really do believe that Apple had some catching up to do. And you know, I feel that it's finally been done with the iPhone 10. And in some ways, they've surpassed everyone else because I believe Face ID is phenomenal. It's the future of authentication. I love it, absolutely. And I feel that the best thing that's ever happened to the iPhone and iOS is the removal of the home button. Really gestures. It's so second nature to me. It took zero time for me to get used to it. To me, the fact that there's no longer a home button feels so much more Android-y, and I just love the iPhone 10. It is a phenomenal piece of hardware.
Yeah. Those are the kinds of things that, like, while I'm trying to hold out, and actually I probably will. It's like I can't help but like say wander by the Apple store and like just like poke at the iPhone 10 and think, gee, wouldn't it be nice if I had one? Because it would feel like it would be a definite step forward, even if like. I'm not sure if I could justify the money for buying one so soon after getting my current phone. But
right.
I'm just tiding myself over, knowing that just don't wait. Well, don't worry. Like by the time when September rolls around, there will be like a replacement for the iPhone 10 or something like that. That will be like, you know, it'll be faster. There will probably be better cameras. There'll probably be a larger model if I really want like a big screen. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't go wrong. Look, I mean, I think the other realistic point of view here, John, is it's past the holidays now. You're in a new year. You're inching closer and closer to a new iPhone. And can you live a few months before September when a new iPhone will come out? Of course you can. And for me, I really was like, if I don't buy this before the holidays, I will not buy it. Basically, was my thing. And the reason I actually went ahead and did it is because I feel like I haven't gotten a new iPhone since the 6 Plus, which is my last one. And so it's a long time ago. Now, it's not my primary phone, but at the same time, I feel that the iPhone 10 is like a milestone. It's really, you know, along with the iPhone 4 that brought us Retina, the 5S that brought us Touch ID and really made fingerprint authentication a reliable, you know, working valid thing. To me, that and the original iPhone, those four phones, original 4, 5S, and 10 are to me the milestone iPhones. They're the ones that changed everything in a significant way for the platform. And the others are just not junk. They're great, but they're not phones that I got excited about.
Yeah, they were basically like, not like stopgaps is almost like a disservice because in like obviously if they're, you know, they're typically fine phones, but like, you know, they're basically there because, well, your 2-year contract is up, so you might as well get a new phone. And
you know, if you check my Twitter thread about this a few weeks back, you know, where I got in a lot of trouble, a lot of hate from that thread, you know, people are like, how can you say that the iPhone is finally caught up with Android? I said, look, I'm not talking about the user experience. I think iOS is a great user experience. For most people, it's probably a better user experience than Android. But for me, it's not a good fit. So I don't like iOS, but I love Apple's hardware. I'm a big Mac fan, a big Mac user. And so when the iPhone 10 came out, the hardware finally felt real to me. It finally felt like Apple was making an effort. But, you know, all the technology, other than Face ID, all the technology that's in the iPhone 10 is technology that has already been implemented on Android before the iPhone. And people were like, how can you say that? Apple introduced a dual camera. I'm like, no, Apple did not introduce a dual camera. Huawei introduced a dual camera with the Honor 6 Plus. And you know, before that as well, although it's not quite a dual camera, it's more like a camera plus, HTC did it with the One M8. And you know, wireless charging's been on Android forever. And the list goes on and on. It's just like, come on, let's get real here. The only thing Apple has really, really innovated in since the iPhone 5S has been processors and, of course, Face ID. But they haven't really brought anything to the table. Like, did they bring an OLED screen to the table? Not until the iPhone 10. And I know some people don't like OLED, and I know that the iPhone 8 screen is phenomenal for an IPS panel. But I'm sorry, I'm OLED or go home. Once you've seen OLED, you're not going back.
Yeah, it's like I know what you mean. Actually, in my dream world, the next iPhone would have a micro LED screen. But I mean, based on what I've heard, I mean, from like Samsung's the Wall TV, where the reason they could do the reason it's 146 inches is because that's the current pixel density for their
it's not
micro
even
LED
there.
TVs.
No.
Like it's not up to par. So yeah, I'm not holding my breath until like maybe 2019 or something like that for a micro LED. But I mean, as it stands, I've heard people say that a lot of the worries about OLED or on smartphones, so like, you know, about burn-in, things like that, is like it can be overblown depending on how you use your phone and things like that.
I mean, it happens. I've seen it. You know, I had one of the early Pixel 2 XL review units, and it burnt in because they didn't have a proper implementation of saving the pixels on the button area, right? And you know what? You can see it. I mean, I see it only when I put like a gray background on the phone or something, and then it's kind of faintly obvious. But you know, in everyday use, I don't notice it ever. That I wouldn't be able to see it at all. And you know, they sent me a new Pixel 2 XL because they're like, because you know, I was one of the first to report it along with Alex Doby of Android Central, and you know, they sent me, and I never set it up because like there's no need. I mean, you know, it's my daily drive. You know how long it takes to set up a phone to be exactly the way you want. It's that's one of the things about Android that I think Apple does so much better is, you know, you back up your phone and you restore it and you're done, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't really happen like that on Android. It's gotten a lot better with Oreo now, but I'm still not convinced that it's something I want to do too often. So, you know, the biggest thing they fixed on the Pixel 2 XL was, you know, the blue tint by recalibrating the screen properly, which now looks like an OLED screen with the vibrant colors. That's what I wanted. That's what everybody wanted. You know, sRGB be damned. I'm sorry, right? It's just like, I don't really care if I put my Pixel 2 XL next to my V30, they're identical screens, and they now look identical. The app icons look the same with the same RGB values. It doesn't look like some crappy muted version of itself, you know? Yeah.
Yes.
So let's switch gears. And speaking of screens, let's talk about the that crazy phone by Red. The Red Hydrogen, is that what it's called?
Yeah, the Hydrogen 1.
Oof. So there was a big piece of news today, was it, or yesterday?
It was actually, it was today.
So about Red announcing that they are actually shipping this phone in the summer. And maybe you want to fill us in on the rest because you've read the story. I haven't. I just read the headline, and you obviously write news stories for a living. So you probably know more than I do at this point.
Okay. Yeah. Well, basically the gist is that they will ship the Hydrogen 1 sometime in the summer. Pre-orders will open probably in April, they say. They still haven't really said just what this thing's going to cost, if I remember correctly. So like I wouldn't be surprised. This is Red. It's probably going to be expensive.
A lot.
But yeah, and they also reiterated some of the specs. So it's like Snapdragon 835, like a dual SIM slot, which is kind of interesting because I don't know how many people are going to be like, you know, popping in different SIMs like as they travel around the world with this thing, but it's got that. A fairly large 4,500 milliamp hour battery, and of course that crazy 4-view display they call it. So it's going to add that sort of 3D effect to your visuals.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting. You know, I obviously haven't seen it. You know, very few journalists have. But I'm excited. I mean, I doubt I'll get a review unit. It's the kind of thing where I'm sure you'll have to have all the connections to get in. And I have connections, but I don't think I have any connections with Red at this point. So, I'm still waiting for my Razer review unit. Hint, 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 Razer. This is, by the way, been an ongoing thing it's been about 3 months now since I requested one. And I'm on their list, they say, but it's kind of getting ridiculous. So, I figure if I shame them publicly every week on my podcast, eventually it'll work, or maybe it won't work at all. Who knows? I'm kind of semi-joking. I'm not trying to shame them. I just think that, it's kind of silly that they couldn't get me a device, because at some point, very soon, probably in a couple of more months, I'm going to have to completely forget about it because it's not going to be newsworthy anymore, Yeah. And that's too bad, so yeah. Took a little while for me to get my essential phone by the way, but it did work out and still in a timely manner. So that was good. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to get devices because if you're not top tier, I mean, you probably have an easier time getting devices than me since you work at Engadget, right? So, I mean, you are in Canada, so it's a different set of PR people, I suppose, right?
Yeah, well, and also it's a question of like how badly do they want to ship this across the border?
Yeah, exactly. So. Indeed. So, what else do we know about red hydrogen? You mentioned that the specs, some specs are in the news story that it's sticking with a 835 Snapdragon 835.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, actually, I kind of understand that because I guess certainly as a camera manufacturer, they're probably used to locking in specs, at a certain point. Then, okay, like we have to actually just work and get this thing done and get it out the door. But yeah, they're like, so I guess it's slightly disappointing though, because this thing's going to be shipping in the summer, like months after phones presumably with the Snapdragon 845 are showing up. So this thing's going to it's going to have to sell based on that display and the battery and I guess whatever other tricks Red can throw into it. So it'll be interesting to see if they can make something that's worth it, even if it's not necessarily, absolutely cutting edge in some respects.
Well, I mean, Snapdragon 835 is still no slouch. It's like, there are a few phones that came out with a Snapdragon 821 after the 835 phones. The G6 is one of them. The Asus Zenfone AR, the ZTE Axon M, the folding phone that has two displays. I mean, look, they're not crappy phones, like in terms of performance. I mean, 821 still holds its own, but it is getting a bit long in the tooth. And yes, if you want the most efficient in terms of like battery use and performance ratio device, you're going to have to go 845. And maybe Red, it's not a priority for them. They're not interested in that. And maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe, they work closely with Qualcomm and they'll get the latest chip anyway, right? We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's like crossing my fingers. With Red, I definitely don't want to rule things out because this is a company that's legendary for like producing hardware that other companies didn't think was actually possible. I mean, they're the ones who they are basically 8K for a lot of people.
Yeah, so. That's right. So speaking of other phones that there's a lot of rumors floating around. Obviously, the hydrogen is not as much of a rumor in the sense that they did say that they're going to launch it in the summer, so that's kind of in the can in a way. Good. I mean, I'm not surprised. I don't even know if this is news in a way because I kind of expected summer. I thought that's what they'd said the last time. But I guess now it's confirmed. So the other phone that's been kind of doing the rounds for a while now, and I haven't really touched about it on the podcast, I was kind of waiting for the new year, is this rumored Galaxy X phone or series of phones to potentially replace the Galaxy S line. With an X from S to X. And of course, the flagship model, or either it's a phone or an entire line of phones, but the flagship model, if it's a line of phone, would be a foldable phone with a foldable, bendable display, which basically would switch between being like a candy bar slate design like we have today to basically a flip phone. With the screen still being one continuous piece and kind of arcing with a hinge similar to what we've seen on the Surface Book from Microsoft, where, the two parts when they're closed are not perfectly flat with each other. So, what's your take on these rumors? I'm sure that you guys have been vetting this in and out for quite a while on various Engadget chat room back channels.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, first, I suppose, some of the rumors are based heavily on patent filings and things like that. So patent filings, they can sometimes give you a good clue as to, where a company is going. But at the same time, it's you always have to take those with a bit of a grain of salt because it's an idea, not like a product roadmap. So they may decide, this didn't really work, or we'll use this one, but not that one. So I think the Let's Go Digital stuff that's actually been floating around I think they actually make some pretty good educated guesses, but whether or not that's exactly what we see is going to probably, I'm sure there'll probably be at least some differences. But I think the basic concept, I could certainly see Samsung doing something like that.
I mean, they have been discussing this for quite a while now. And they even, didn't they show something like that at CS a few years ago?
Actually, I'm trying to remember. I know they've certainly shown folding displays and things like that. But actually,
that's what I thought. Yeah, not a phone, but at least a folding display. Yeah,
I think the folding stuff was some early conceptual stuff, here's what a folding phone might look like someday. Whereas it wasn't really we're not going to be making this, but look at how good our flexible OLED technology is.
Right.
So.
And I mean, it's inevitable. This is coming, whether it's coming this year or the year after. So stay tuned. I will link in the show notes below to a story by Android Central that I think does a pretty good job. Wow, Android Central is getting a lot of love today. I'm going to show you because I think it's a good article and it kind of summarizes things really nicely. But I want to talk also a little bit about the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus leaks. I have in my notes here, I have a link to an Engadget story about the Galaxy S9 box being leaked, and maybe you can elaborate on what we know about the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus. I'm hearing all kinds of things like that the S9 will have a single camera in the back, whereas the S9 Plus will have a dual camera in the back, but that they'll still be able to do variable aperture like portrait mode, in the same way as the Pixel 2 XL has the ability to do portrait mode using the dual pixel autofocus system. That it's going to be even more edgeless than it is today. That's pretty much what we've heard so far, right?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the gist of how I've heard about the S9 is that, and not too surprisingly, it'll be more iterative than, say, the S8 was. I mean, the S8 was basically a total break in design. So, it's kind of hard not to be iterative after that. But yeah, the main thing is that in some ways this feels like the iPhone 7 of Galaxy S phones in that it is not a revolution by any means, but adding a lot of the things that you were wondering, well, why doesn't Samsung have this or that or the other thing? So stereo speakers is one of the big things. Finally you have a Galaxy phone where you can't silence the audio just by putting your thumb on the wrong place. And they already had water resistance. Maybe they will have face detection that works quickly.
Well, they have to. I mean, I think this is another thing that if they don't have face detection that at least matches Face ID, they're dead in the water. This needs to happen for them to stay competitive, and I wouldn't be surprised if it will. I know for sure Huawei is working on something for the P11, and OnePlus and Huawei with the Honor V10 have shown some sort of secondary grade, not Android Pay or Google Pay compatible, but at least unlock your phone compatible authentication using face some sort of face system. It's optically based. It's not infrared like the iPhone, so it doesn't work, when there's a lack of light. But I mean, at the same time, I don't want Samsung to half-ass this, because to me, the Retina scan feature on the Galaxy S8 and Note 8, they don't work at all for me, and they're half-assed. There's no way I can rely on them. They're totally unreliable, and I can't use them, and I have to use the fingerprint reader. So if Samsung does face recognition, they need to match Face ID.
Yeah, it's like, and the real question is whether it is, because the box leak that showed up recently, well, assuming it's accurate, like it mentions just iris scanner. It's like, so it could just be what we had on the S8, or like some slight improvement of it, like, well, this time it's faster. But if that's the case, that's probably not going to be good enough for like, say, like online shopping or like,
if it doesn't do Google Pay or Android Pay, whatever, it's Google Pay now. I keep saying Android Pay. If it doesn't do that, forget it. I think that's the key here. And frankly, I'm kind of surprised that these leaks are showing a fingerprint reader under the camera, because I really would have thought that they would put an under the screen fingerprint reader on this phone.
Yeah, that would certainly be ideal, because obviously it's like, even if the fingerprint reader is in a more convenient position, it still means having to remember to, put my finger there. And then. Well,
I personally actually prefer fingerprint readers in the back, but I feel that Samsung's missed the boat in where they put it. And these illustrations show another missing of the boat, not quite as bad this time, but it needs to be an inch below the camera on the back, about 2/3 of the way up, Samsung. It's completely intuitive when it's there, because it's exactly where your index finger falls naturally. And if you have a Pixel 2, or any of the Huawei and LG phones that have a fingerprint reader in the back, you'll know that you reach into your pocket, and as you pull the phone out, your finger is on the fingerprint reader, and by the time you put the phone in front of your face, it's unlocked. It's very much the same experience as Face ID, but with a fingerprint reader. To me, having the fingerprint reader in the front does not work that way, because I need to pull the phone out of my pocket before I can put my finger on the fingerprint reader. So even if Samsung does an under the screen fingerprint reader, it's not going to be, to me, as well implemented as a back of the phone fingerprint reader. You have an Essential, you know how well that works. You just put your hand in your pocket, you pull out the phone, you're unlocked.
Yeah, it's like it is actually really well placed and fairly easy to hit on the Essential phones. So I have to give them kudos for doing something that Samsung somehow hasn't managed to do in years, like on their first try. So that's pretty good.
I know it's not so hard, Samsung. How did you botch this on the Galaxy S8 and Note 8? And it's better to have it on below the camera than next to the camera, like these illustrations of the S9 and S9 Plus show. But at the same time, it's still it's a kind of an awkward placement. It needs to be significantly lower on the back of the phone, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would think so. It's like if they're going to do it on the back in the first place. Yeah, actually personally, I would kind of like it on the front, because I'm the sort who will like lean over to check his phone, and then and obviously if the phone, you don't have to lift the phone off the desk necessarily to if you've got
that is true. Reader. That is a huge advantage having the fingerprint reader on the front. If your phone is on the front, but this is where Face ID should do the job, right? Yeah, you look at your phone, it should unlock.
Yeah,
and there you go. And that's where Apple wins. I think the iPhone X is testament to that. Also, rumors that it's going to keep the headphone jack, which makes me infinitely happy.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, actually, admittedly, it's like I am starting to think that might that will matter less and less over time. But for people who care about wired audio, and there are obviously a lot of people
that is me.
Yeah, then obviously just being able to just plug in and get going is good. I mean, I don't mind so much, because usually these days, actually, when I'm listening to music, I'm actually at the gym, so I'm actually probably listening off of my Apple Watch. So obviously I need Bluetooth headphones anyways. But obviously right. I'm a bit of an early adopter, niche case type. So I can't represent everybody.
No, I mean, look, I think that the AirPods are a phenomenal product from Apple, and I think that for 90% or 95% of the people out there, they're the best product on the market today for what their intended purpose is. And I think that it's very reasonable to pair them with an Apple Watch and use that at the gym. And I think a lot of people do, which is why both the Apple Watch and the AirPods are very popular. But, for me, it just doesn't work. I just expect higher quality than that. And that's just me. And I know it's just a fringe thing, but at the same time, it's a legacy port that's cheap and ubiquitous, and that's what makes it so good to me. It's like, it works in my car, and it works in, both my older cars, and it works in, pretty much anywhere, and you can connect it to pretty much anything, and that's nice. That's just a nice little perk. And yes, you can have adapters and all that, and it's feasible, but it introduces friction, and I think I'm hoping Samsung, actually lives up to this rumor and keeps the headphone jack, the S9, S9 Plus, because that's kind of, I think, becomes at that point a differentiator between them and the competition.
Yeah, that's true. It's like, there are more and more companies that feel that there's no need to include a headphone jack. Like the Essential phone that I have here, no headphone jack. So so if I wanted to, there is that actually incredibly over-designed headphone jack adapter that they include, but at the same time, it's obviously there are a lot of people who would prefer just not to even have to think about that. So.
As an aside, by the way, that adapter that comes with the Essential and also the one that comes with the Razer phone are two of the best sounding USB Type-C digital adapters that you can buy. The worst sounding one being the HTC U11s, and one that's in the middle of the pack is the Pixel 2 XL's adapter. This is coming from me, who's a bit of an audiophile. If you have a phone that's USB-C but does not have a headphone jack, do yourself a favor and go to either to the Razer store or to the Essential store and buy the dongle and use that instead. You'll see a huge improvement in quality over what came with your phone, whatever came with your phone. And if you have a U11 in particular, do yourself that favor. It's the HTC one is one of the worst sounding adapters. The Pixel one's actually pretty decent, and but doesn't quite live up to the Essential. And the Razer is the best of them, but it's just a tiny bit better than the Essential, which is quite a bit better than the Pixel, which is itself significantly better than the HTC one, if I had to quantify them all. Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's a science. Well, it's a subjective science, I guess. So, what are your other expectations from Samsung this year around? Do you think, obviously Snapdragon 845, at least on the US versions, are we going to see something that they're going to surprise us with, you think?
To me, I think that the main thing that the S9 is, hopefully going to surprise us with is that variable aperture rear camera trick that there's supposed to be, at least supposed to be doing. Where I believe, if you look at that box leak, it's supposed to be between f1.5 and f2.4 aperture. So now, if they can do that, they're going to actually solve probably one of the, to me at least, is one of the lingering problems with phone cameras, is that that inability to actually sort of change the nature of your shot.
But John, that's not new, right? The Note 8 does that. It just doesn't call it. It doesn't give you an f-stop number for it. Huawei's been doing this for all their dual camera phones since as I said, the Honor 6 Plus, which was 3-4 years ago now. So it's a synthetic variable aperture using the dual camera system. And in fact, the Huawei P9 in its early versions, before portrait mode was a thing, and that was introduced by Apple, basically think of portrait mode as a variable aperture that's pre-tuned for you. And the Honor phones and the Huawei phones had the variable aperture, and that's how you did portrait mode. But you had a little slider to adjust the aperture. And the best part is you could do it after the fact. And And the Note doesn't let you do it after the fact, but it lets you, I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure the Note 8 doesn't let you do it after the fact, but it does let you do it at the time. And it doesn't give you an f-stop value like the Huawei phones do, but it does certainly give you a very clear, progressive blurring of the background that would match a variable aperture. So that would be nothing new. It would just be what they did on the Note 8, with a slightly better UI. And hopefully they add the feature that Huawei has, which lets you refocus not just a variable aperture after the fact, but refocus after the fact too.
Okay. Yeah. I guess the one question I have is like on the Note 8, was the variable aperture mechanical or digital? Because
no, this is all digital. We're not talking about anything mechanical here. They would not have a mechanical variable aperture on this. They've only done that with one phone, and that's that folder, that super expensive Chinese folder phone. And it's not a variable aperture. It's two set values. There's an iris that goes from one aperture size to another. I think is f over 1.6 to f over 2.4 or something.
Okay.
And that's a mechanical aperture. And that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking here is purely synthetic aperture using the dual camera system, or in the case of the S9, which is rumored to have a single camera, using the dual pixels from the dual pixel autofocus, just like the Pixel 2 XL uses the dual pixels for portrait mode. So you could do variable aperture with that. All you need is the parallax, right? So on the Huawei, the interface is that when you tap to focus in variable aperture mode, you're given a default value of f over 2.0, and there's a little slider that lets you adjust the depth of field between, get this, 0.95 and f over 16.
Oh man, that's ridiculous.
It's awesome. And the 0.95 is indeed very much insane, and the f over 16 pretty much puts everything in focus. And then the best part is once you take that shot, it has stored enough data that you can do it again after the fact.
Okay, this is one of those things where I wish I had better access to Huawei phones and so on, because actually they're not that hard to get in Canada as you might think, because say for example the Huawei P10, carriers were actually advertising that as one of their main phones, as opposed to not just the usual iPhone Galaxy S kind of, Pixel kind of selection. So it was interesting to see them hawk that. But yeah, it's in terms of actually taking a look at them. Actually, I haven't looked at them all that often lately, so I need to actually maybe I don't know, look at a Mate 10 or something like that. Yeah,
you should. It's a great phone, and it has all those features. The other one to check out is the new Honor V10, which is basically a Mate 10 Redux. I think it's just missing the OIS, but everything else is the same. Huawei even supports it on their basic phones, like the Honor 6. The Honor 7X, which was just launched before the holidays, is a $200 retail phone that, in many ways, almost, at least in imaging, surpasses, in my opinion, the OnePlus 5T, and has variable aperture.
Okay, so that's
so
cool.
Wow, right? Yeah, and it's all software at this point. So now I could be wrong. It's possible Samsung is going to take that camera module from that Chinese folder Galaxy phone that they just released, that Richard Lai wrote about like a month ago, where it has physically two apertures to choose from. But I think that's kind of not necessary with the wonderful world of software or computational photography, as it were. And it's not the first time. The Nokia it was the N86, I think it was. One of the Nokia Symbian phones had dual aperture, like two set aperture that you could select between. The user couldn't select it, but the phone would automatically pick one of them for you. So it's been done before, the mechanical aspect of that, but getting what we have on a real camera in that compact of a system is not going to happen. And honestly, the computational photography, the software aspects of variable aperture is so good now that I don't think that needs to happen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, you look at the Pixel 2 and it's one camera is not even doing some of the tricks that Samsung's rumored to be doing, and portrait photos look great, and I think if I remember correctly, the front-facing camera can actually take selfies that are like.
Yeah. Now that's not using any actual like depth data. It's really using AI.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about the Pixel 2 XL is half of their computational photography, and the Pixel 2 as well. Half of the computational photography that is being used in there is basically because of Google, having analyzed the millions and probably billions of photos they have in both their search results in the image search and in their, Google Photos that people have uploaded. And they've kind of determined, they've machine learned what a good photo should look like. And then they apply this to the camera, and they can update that data set on the camera over the air. So basically when when they update the camera app on the phone, you get a new data set that's better. And I found that my Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL are essentially learning and taking better pictures all the time.
Yeah, that's something.
And that's AI, and that's the power of, like, you can't, what's the point of hardware aperture when you do that? I think the only area where hardware still surpasses software is optical image stabilization versus digital image stabilization. If you have the room to crop the image, like in video recording, so that's as the Pixel original didn't have OIS and did that very well, and the Pixel 2 XL does both OIS and digital stabilization for video very well. The reason that is the case, and in fact, this goes back again to Nokia on the N series. I believe it was also the N86 that introduced this feature on Symbian, where the sensor was 8 megapixels, but it was recording VGA video at the time, as back in the day. But in the same things, the sensor on the Pixel is 12 megapixels, and it's recording, at best 4K, most of the time 1080p. So it's using essentially a subset of the pixels in the array, right? So you can move, like in software, that window and compensate for motion because you have all this border around you of usable pixels, right? And that's the only time that you can do digital, stabilization properly. But when you're trying to take a full-on 12 megapixel shot where you have to use every single pixel, the only way you can stabilize that without losing any pixels is by doing optical, right? Yeah, so exactly. That's an advantage where I think we're still going to continue seeing OIS on a lot of phones because of that.
Yeah, it's like I can't imagine them letting go of that. I mean, and I remember, for many people, one of the biggest improvements of the Pixel 2 was just like, oh well, hey, there's optical image stabilization, where before it was relying primarily on software, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah, I mean, it did a decent job before, but I could trick it into failing, whereas I could do a better job with any phone that had OIS in certain circumstances. So now that the Pixel 2 has OIS, it's the best of both worlds. It's really, really phenomenal. And I think, honestly, that's going to be the challenge for the Galaxy S9 and for the iPhones following the iPhone 10 is, can they match the Pixel 2? Because people are still, companies, whatever, phones are still trying to beat the Pixel right now.
Yeah, it's like that's going to be kind of hard. And honestly, I don't see. Actually, I'm not sure if Apple or Samsung would necessarily be able to do it, because Google's whole advantage is that they have this.
Yeah, the data massive, set. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, this massive AI resource that, even Apple with Siri and Samsung with Bixby and and their various other AI related technologies, they're just not on that level. So they have to rely on hardware to take the best possible photos.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. I'm really hoping, Huawei introduced some AI features on the Mate 10, and they are using data sets. But of course, Huawei does not have access to that same amount of data, right? And so it's inferior because of it. And don't get me wrong, the hardware and the basic image processing of the Mate 10 is phenomenal. I mean, it's Leica, and you can feel that expertise when you take those photos. And f/1.6 on both lenses. Wow, right? It's phenomenal camera. Don't get me wrong, but the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL still totally give it a run for the money every time. It's just phenomenal what it comes out of that Google phone. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm excited about the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus. I mean, I will be at Mobile Congress in Barcelona, so of course I'll keep you stay tuned to the podcast for my thoughts on the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus when it's announced there. It's pretty clear they're going to be announcing it there now, right, John?
Oh yeah, so I mean, like if I remember correctly, they've actually basically locked it down. So like they're actually going to do it there, which is interesting because like I mean, for the past few years we're used to them doing like some event that's like just a few weeks off from it, which is always seems like a kind of a screw you Mobile World Congress kind of gesture. But like no, like they're actually like it sounds like they're actually going to do it in Barcelona. So
they did the S7 in Barcelona, so maybe every other year they do the phone in Barcelona.
Yeah, actually, that's right. Actually, come to think of it, it's like I'm just so used to them like doing some event in March or thereabouts.
It's true.
So. Actually, I suppose one thing I should say is that I think even if all they do with the S9 is like say, oh well, we've got a brighter aperture on it than last year. It's like, well, that's still a brighter aperture than last year. So like, if you thought the nighttime photos were good before, then they're going to be great now. Or like if you're taking a macro shot, like the background is going to be even blurrier. It's going to look even more like you're taking a photo with a big proper camera. So, and you combine that with the dual camera that's rumored for the S9 Plus, and it's like, yeah, this could still be a really good phone for mobile photographers.
Oh, I have no doubts. I mean, Samsung has, consistently delivered amazing camera experience since the S6, and I could expect them to continue being top tier, and I root for them. I'm a big fan. Let's switch gears a little bit again, and we touched a little bit on the OnePlus in our various conversations so far, and there's some kind of scary news there with some credit card fraud, or well, it's not fraud on behalf of OnePlus, but it's a security breach, I guess, that has exposed some credit card data from OnePlus customers. And what's your take on that?
Well, to me, it feels like it's just like the problems keep piling up with OnePlus because they had that problem where they had that one engineer mode app that allowed like root level access if somebody actually had access to your physical access to your phone. So it's not like they could remotely hijack it, but still, there was that, and then there was like the devices transmitting like data that people like they weren't fully aware of that. So. Yeah. And then there was that problem with the OnePlus 5 where it would reboot during emergency calls, which is kind of exactly the last time you want it to reboot. So, so it was like this is one of those companies where it feels like in many ways they get like sort of the broad strokes right. Like, oh hey, like you've got a fast, very capable phone for relatively little money. But like you could, this is why it costs like, $500 and not $700 is because they're not sweating the small details that they're both on the actual phone itself and in the back end, like on things like say ordering your phone. That make a big difference that this is why like say, part of why companies like Apple do so well is because they have this great secure shopping system where you can like within a few seconds, well not a few seconds, but like a short amount of time, you can have a phone on your way, and you're not going to be hearing like a year later that your data was exposed in a credit card breach, and that you now have to watch like a hawk in case somebody decides to go on a shopping spree with your info. So.
Right. I mean, look, first of all, I want to say if you were a OnePlus customer and you give your credit card to OnePlus, the best course of action right now is to get a new card with a new number from your bank, all right? Like, just get it done. Trust me on this. And that's a minor thing. It's easy to do. But I want to root for OnePlus. I love these folks. I think they're doing good work. They're doing good phones. They're really nice. But yes, you're right. They're not sweating those details, at least not on the security aspects. And they're kind of doing that weird, shady thing that, sometimes where they think they can get away with stuff. And I think transparency is something that they need to improve. And that goes with security. And, I think a lot of this I see this with a lot of smaller startups. It's not just a China thing. I think it's inexperience and youth, and it's got to improve because look, OnePlus is no longer very young. We're on essentially the 4th generation devices, right? And the 5th generation is about to come with the OnePlus 6. Look, the reality is this: I like their stuff. I'm willing to forgive them, but they do need to get on top of it. And I do feel that a lot of this is caused by kind of inexperience in youth and growing pains. I'll be honest though, but I'm a bit biased here. But I saw the red OnePlus 5T at CES, and ever since then, that's all I want. So maybe that's why I still love them so much, because they do these beautiful colors randomly. And I have to say, the white one with the red power button was a nice touch as well. And I like white phones, but the red one, wow, the red one.
Oh yeah, see, I haven't had the luxury of seeing them in person, but like. Yes, I mean, I like when they do colors. They don't just do like, let's just do a white one and a black one and maybe a gray one and then call it a day. Like they actually put some attention to it. I just wish that they would make more of the stuff available on day one as opposed to dribbling it out where it's like, hey, like, we only have the black one to start. Hope you don't mind that. And then, but look, conveniently, like weeks later, there's a white one that like, if I'd known that one was out, I would have bought that one instead. But
I think if we unleashed a bunch of Apple fan people on the OnePlus universe, assuming they were willing, right? We would get somebody to draw a bell curve of the ultimate time to buy a OnePlus phone based on the fact that they always come out with a flagship in the spring and then they replace it with a flagship plus in the fall. And, there's got to be an optimum time to buy a OnePlus device because, as you said, they don't come out with all the colors right away. So my gut feeling, and of course, if you buy the old one too close to the release of the new one, then you have last year's phone. So to me, I think the sweet spot would be in the winter, like around the holidays, is probably the best time to buy a OnePlus, because here's my theory: you are getting the Plus flagship, like the second, the T, labeled flagship, improved for the year, and you're probably at the point where you're getting some of the interesting colors. Not all, but. Also, if you buy then, it's still going to be another 6 months before the spring edition comes out with the next one, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So I think the Apple folks need to get on top of that, because they do all these things on when's the best time to buy a Mac, right? When's the best time to buy an iPhone? Remember, have you seen those websites? It's really cool.
Yeah, like Mac Rumors does that thing where they actually have a buyer's guide that specifically says, like, okay, like, hold off on this one. It hasn't been updated in a long time. So I know, admittedly, like that doesn't always work. Like, say, for example, like the poor people who are probably like sitting there waiting for a Mac Pro, and then like finally they have something new to buy. Well, if they don't mind an all-in-one desktop.
For sure.
But yeah, it's like. I mean, Apple has kind of done that thing before. I mean, they did have that red iPhone 7 that showed up. So
that was good.
Yeah. So it's one of those things like I could see them doing that again, like say, like a how interesting would a red iPhone 10 be?
I was just thinking that. We're like-minded people here. Oh my God, that would be hot. See, this is how I would want mine. I would want one that has the silver edges, like the white one, like the stainless steel polished edge, and then have a red back covers, and of course the front being black. That would be the shizzle. That'd be a product red version. Yeah,
it's like the funny thing is I could honestly realistically see them doing that, like not just as a daydream. Like no, like actually they might actually do that. I mean, either that or they do some clever trick where they have like the sides are like a slightly different shade of red, like an accent red for the trim.
Oh, so that would be cool. Yeah, that would be nice too.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, you have ColorWare. They're not a sponsor. I almost was going to make a fake sponsorship, but then I realized it's probably not a good idea. But I haven't bought anything from them, but I hear they do all kinds of Apple colorization.
Yeah. So if you want a phone that's like, actually, occasionally I'll visit their site just to see what, how have things changed? Like what items can I customize? And it's like, it gets a bit ridiculous to the point where it's like you can, customize, like say the front, the back, like the side trim, like the home button if your device has a home button, that kind of thing. So you can get this very exacting look for like a phone or a computer or what have you, and so it's like I mean, it's expensive as all get out, but if you want to have the exact look for your device, like you're going to have this thing for like a couple of years or more, and you want something that stands out, then it's like, well, it's pretty much the place to go.
Indeed. I want to switch gears again and mention that a couple of videos that I posted on my YouTube channel that you might find interesting, dear listeners. And one of them is this company Bezalel. I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's Bezalel. They are a power accessory company, and they do primarily wireless chargers. So they sent me their Latitude and Futura X iPhone 10 accessories. These are, and I guess it's Futura 10 because it's an X, like iPhone X, iPhone 10. It's a really thin, really flat aluminum and like beautifully made aluminum and acrylic, white acrylic wireless charging pad, 15 watt compatible for the fastest possible wireless charging. So that'll work with, a Note 8, Galaxy S8, V30, all the Android phones that do Qi wireless, and of course the iPhone 10, the iPhone 8, 8 Plus. And check it out. I unboxed it and I should give you a quick tour of it. And you can buy cases for their phones, that work with, that are also branded, to go with them, with the pad. And those cases, some of them, like the iPhone 6 and 7 cases, have, the wireless coil in the case and like a little pass through for the lightning. And they also make cases for the iPhone 8 and iPhone 10, but of course those are completely passive cases. They don't have any electronics in them, since you don't need them, since the coils are built in behind the glass on these phones. And the case they sent me to go with the pad is the case for the iPhone 10. And it's just a nice black TPU case. But here's the kicker. Here's the thing that differentiates them. And again, I'm not sponsoring them. I'm just telling you to check it out because it's one of the recent things I unboxed. They claim, and I haven't been able to test this yet, but they claim that there's magnets in the cases so that if you place it down on the mat, it'll kind of like center itself to the right place automatically. Yeah,
that's actually really handy because, like, I think I haven't used a whole lot of wireless charging, but I know from experience that sometimes you'll have like a less than ideal position and it's not actually charging, or it'll be positioned in such a way that like the phone slides off or something like that. So having it something that actually sort of keeps it in the spot where it needs to be is it's actually pretty good.
So I haven't put it to the test because I have a feeling that he's using electromagnets, like he's using the actual coils inside the wireless base, the charging pad, to kind of mate with physical hard, permanent magnets inside the case. And when I did the unboxing, I didn't plug in the thing because I didn't have a USB cord nearby to do it. So I didn't try it out, but I need to try it out and let you know if it'll work. So stay tuned for an answer on that. But it didn't work like just with it off. So I have a feeling that they're just using the coils as electromagnets to make that happen as well. Which is kind of clever. So quickly, John, tell me a little bit, like, what phones have you played with in the past year? I mean, obviously, you don't review phones for Engadget, but you are a bit of a mobile tech guy. And I know you have an iPhone 7 and you have an Essential. Any other phones that you were able to borrow for review or that came across your desk that you enjoyed?
Okay. Actually, I haven't had a whole lot of that stuff lately. So it's, but that said, it's like I'm the kind who will always find an excuse to try things. Oh, actually, kind of think of it. I did actually have an opportunity to try the BlackBerry Key 1 for a little bit. A little bit, but it was
great phone, huh?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny because it's like, obviously it's TCL, so at heart in some ways, but it is probably the first phone from a first Android phone from BlackBerry that actually feels spiritually like a BlackBerry. So I mean, obviously the keyboard is the main thing, but actually there's just kind of a lot of things like. The build quality is really good. Like the battery is phenomenal on it. The keyboard itself is actually well done. And like the processor is mid tier, and it's like you can definitely tell this isn't a high end phone because there's say a bit of a lag, when you launch things and things so on. But like in terms of just like fluidity and just overall responsiveness, like, yeah, this feels actually about right. And it's
also great battery life, right? I mean, that's the thing they were going for.
Yeah, it's I've heard from people who their phones just keep going and going and going, and it's like it's one of those phones like if you're the sort of person who basically lives off their phone, like you're like constantly emailing people and or messaging them and you like. Or for that matter, like if you're one of those people who like goes to a concert or something, like a music festival, and you're going to be there for hours, and you're going to probably be recording like seemingly like an hour of video, just from all your little concert snippets. Like this is the kind of phone that you would actually want because it's still going to be alive at the end of the day, like without necessarily having to use a battery pack. So I kind of like that they actually focused on something that. Frankly, a lot of phone makers still don't really pay close attention to. I mean, they're getting better, but a lot of them is still like, well, so long as it lasts through a day, like a typical day, that's all they care about.
For sure. It's interesting you brought that up because it's not just the Key 1. Every Snapdragon 625 phone I've used, which is their older mid-range chip, which has now been replaced by the 630, has incredible battery life. As long as it's paired with something in the 3,000 milliamp hour plus range, it is just obliterates everything else in terms of battery life. So I think that's part of the reason the Key 1, they selected this chip, I think on purpose. They wanted to go back to the days of the BlackBerry, which, we all know had great battery life, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think because they realized like the whole point of the Key 1 is to appeal to those people who are like desperately holding on to their like Bold 9900 or
oh my god,
or phones like that. Like they're like desperately hoping. Admittedly, there aren't too many people who are like literally holding on to those phones because like that's like a few years old and the battery's probably dead on it and it's hard to get a replacement. But you get the idea. Like those people who are like, they would, so long as BlackBerry is still alive and they're making decent phones, they will buy a BlackBerry. So like they're just still hoping that it will live up to the reputation of their old BlackBerry, the one that lasted for a week.
For sure, yeah.
So.
I think that anybody who had a 9900 probably eventually switched to a BlackBerry Classic or BlackBerry Passport, which, as you know, were BlackBerry 10-based phones, the last of their breed, and were actually pretty damn good for what they were at the time. So, but I think then the Priv came out, which, was a mixed bag in many ways, was more of an Android phone than a BlackBerry. But I feel like the Key 1 is more of a BlackBerry phone than an Android phone in many ways. It has a lot of those attributes that you just described that really made BlackBerry so good, but in a modern iteration with a modern OS and all the apps and all the features you'd want, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, if I remember correctly, Michael Fisher, is he still actually using one as a daily driver?
I think he's switched onward now, but he was for a long time. Look, I have to tell you, I went to Google I/O, obviously, and if you were a cool kid at I/O, the phone you rocked during the conference was the Key 1. We all had them. I did. Michael Fisher, Joshua Vergara. We were all on our BBs and we were like typing away on our keyboards like mad children. It was awesome. We had a really good time with that one.
Yeah, it's like it's almost a shame that like if that phone, or at least the equivalent of that phone, had come out when say if instead of doing BlackBerry 10. They had actually put out as close to a Key 1 as you could get, like around 2013 or something like that. The company might be in a very different position than it is now. Not necessarily not resurgent, not to the heydays of say 2009 or something. But they might actually, instead of basically falling or tanking and having to replace their CEO again, they would actually have. This small but solid following that's where it'd be they'd be selling millions of phones, like a quarter or something like that, instead of like maybe like several 100,000 or something. I'm not sure what they're selling.
No,
right
you're
now.
right. I mean, look, the same can be said about Nokia. Nokia's come back. They now have really great Android phones, culminating with the Nokia 8. There is obviously a Nokia 9 in the works, which is going to be even more flagship drool worthy. And, again, they follow the same formula. Bring all of the attributes that made a Nokia phone, and then put Android on there to really make it a modern platform-based device. And it's a win all around. I mean, I unfortunately have not been able to get a Nokia 8 review unit, but when the Nokia 9 comes out, I'll make sure to get one and I'll let you know. But everything my little bit of time with them so far kind of parallels very much what we've seen with the Key One.
Yeah, that's like, well, that sounds good. That's I just wish again, like that these companies had kind of realized what they would probably like. I mean, some would almost call it an inevitable move. Like they'd realized what they had to do sooner, so that they weren't like this like company that was effectively dead and is like now kind of bouncing back, but not really, and so it basically has to start from scratch.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, we should wrap it up. So why don't you tell people where they can find you on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you have places on the web, other than obviously Engadget. You should pimp that as well. Let people know where they can find you.
Okay, well, in addition to Engadget, which you should visit frequently, preferably, the easiest way to find me is like basically like I'm Jon Fingas on Twitter, on Instagram, I'm trying to remember where else like I would use that.
Snapchat?
Actually, I think so. Although that said, I hardly use Snapchat, but I'm on there. And let's see, obviously, it's not hard to find me on Facebook because you just have to look for my name. So like I am definitely a social creature. So like, yeah, you can definitely find me. Actually, I need to get back onto Instagram. I haven't been taking a lot of photos lately, and I love to take photos, but it's Canadian winter and it's been really cold lately. So it's like, it's really hard to enjoy taking photos outdoors when it's like minus 20 Celsius and
for sure.
And taking your hands out of your gloves for like even like 5 minutes is going to probably give you frostbite. So
yeah, definitely. But look, you are in Ottawa. It's a beautiful town. There's lovely canals. I say this is a challenge. You should, on a sunny day, if you can, do yourself a favor and go for a photo walk with your Essential and put that Google Pixel camera to its to the test.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna give that a chance because like it's one of those ones like I haven't obviously like with my Apple Watch like there's only so many things I can do when my phone doesn't actually have a connection. So
just carry two phones.
Yeah, exactly. I may need to just admit it and get like a second plan or something, just so that I can always have another phone hanging around that's like always connected, like my iPhone is. So
totally.
So I might just do that.
Awesome. Well, you guys know where to find me. I'm Tankrel on Twitter. That's at TNKGRL, like the comic book character without the vowels. That's how you'll remember it. On Instagram, it's Tankrel as well. Go find me there. I do love Instagram. You can find me on Facebook if you search for me, all that good stuff. But most importantly, check out my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Miriam Jouars. So my full name spelled out, Miriam with a Y. And go to mobiletechpodcast.com to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. You'll find the RSS feed there, but we're also on iTunes and on Pocket Casts and on most of the well-known podcasting platforms. Again, all you need is the RSS feed. mobiletechpodcast.com is where you'll find that. Stay tuned for another episode of the podcast next week. I'll have another awesome guest on. And Jon, thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. It's pretty awesome. Come back sometime, okay?
All right, definitely. I was happy to catch up, actually. It's been
that
great.
is nice because we don't get to talk that often. Yeah. So yeah, stay tuned. I have a Cat S41 rugged phone that I'm going to be unboxing shortly, and I'll be mentioning on the podcast. So catch you all next week. Cheers.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.